Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 324 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is The LymeLight Foundation, an interview with Phyllis Bedford. My name is Christina Kovacs. I am the founder of ladyoflyme.com, and over the years, I've done quite a bit of work for advocacy, work for patients, as well as a little bit of work with the LymeLight Foundation as well.
And I'm Matt Sabatello, and I'm so happy to be here today with Christina Kovacs to interview Phyllis Bedford of the LymeLight Foundation.
Yes, we had such a great interview coming up. We're going to talk about a lot of things from how LymeLight was founded to the work that they do today, some of their really cool events, the ways that they go beyond just their organization to impact Lyme disease and advocacy. And it's really a great story of hope.
Hello, Phyllis. I am so happy to have you here, everyone. Welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast. We have the one and only Phyllis Bedford, the founder of the LymeLight Foundation, and I'm so happy to have her here. So thrilled to have you here, Phyllis.
Well, thank you. My goodness. Thank you so much. That's quite an introduction.
Yes. Well, I've known you. Gosh, we've known each other for so long, and we've worked together when I was still bedridden and just kind of totally on the out still. So it's just really amazing to kind of have this full circle moment to be here and to talk about your work. And I obviously adore LymeLight. And so I'm just so happy.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I say to people that you've been a gift to LymeLight Foundation.
My
You've
gosh.
definitely, with your fashion sense and your creative eye, have made us a lot more upscale and fashionable.
You're so kind. You're so kind. Oh my gosh. I'm just so happy that that all worked out. And I know we'll talk about that later as well in the podcast. So if someone doesn't know what we're talking about, we'll kind of go into that as well. But yes, I'm just so happy to have you here. And, I think a lot of people might know your name. They might know about LymeLight, but they don't know the backstory of how LymeLight came to be, just kind of how you started it, you and your husband, of course, together, what LymeLight has achieved. And I'm just really excited to highlight all of that and really have people hear your whole story, and just how you got here to where you are now.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. So starting off, just for kind of some of our listeners who might not know, going back to your childhood, I think kind of talking about, as you, grew up and things like that, now you knew that you had Lyme disease, from when you were a kid, but when you were growing up, did you have signs or symptoms, or kind of what was your first moment when you were like, some things maybe not quite right with my body?
Yeah, looking back to my childhood, not so much do I look back and think there were signs of Lyme disease. Really, it wasn't until I matured, and then it was female-related issues that kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, again, what we find with our grant recipients. For the young ladies, a lot of time it's at maturation when hormones are kicking in that Lyme rears its lovely head. And that's what potentially happened to me. I don't know if it was Lyme disease, but I certainly, through my teenage years, had issues, into my married years had issues. And then in my 30s, I was, after children, was diagnosed with endometriosis. And I now know that there is a potential and likely connection between endometriosis and Lyme disease. So that is, that is my story, but not so much in childhood.
Okay. So as you got older, you started thinking, it's weird, right? Like, I'm having these symptoms. I mean, I definitely relate to that too. Whenever, something sort of starts changing in your body and you think, well, that's definitely not really normal. And you
Right.
just, something's not right, but you can't really put your finger on it. So, I mean, I definitely relate to that. I'm sure pretty much everyone listening can relate to that too. And they just know that things are changing in their body. So, let's fast forward a little bit. So you're in your 30s, you have your children.
Right.
When did the idea of Lyme disease kind of start to come into your world? When did it enter your world and you started to kind of learn a little bit more about it? Like, when did things change for your family?
Well, it was through our oldest daughter, Sarah. It was through her diagnosis that we learned about it. And so she was bitten by a tick on a field trip in middle school. And looking back now, it's like we did absolutely everything wrong, like did not keep the tick to be tested. I mean, who knew about that?
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'd heard about Lyme disease at that time. But the pediatrician did recommend that she be tested for Lyme, but we, because of the tick bite, but we did the ELISA test.
Oh.
So we did that test, came back negative, which we all know is the first tier and not as sensitive as a test. But as a parent, you're like, phew, okay, great. We don't have Lyme disease. That's fantastic. And so that was middle school. When she got into high school, she became more and more what you were just alluding to, Christina, more and more symptomatic and more that you just knew that something was wrong, and she knew something was wrong. And we did what I call the doctor merry-go-round, and where you see one doctor after another and they do all their testing, and she's fine. And matter of fact, she looks really good. Everything's great. We're not sure what's going on. And you get this, over and over again. And right now I just want to do a plug for, and you said this beautifully, Christina, when you know something is wrong, if you know something is wrong with yourself, your spouse, your child, don't give up. Keep on pursuing and keep on trying to find answers, which is what we did. We kept on and we entered more and more into the integrative natural approach, because you're on the allopathic approach and you're striking out. But interestingly, as we were pursuing, I was in the grocery store one day and I was shopping, and a friend came up to me and said, I'd heard about Sarah's illnesses and symptoms and so forth. I think she could have Lyme disease because my friend's daughter has very similar symptoms. And I said, no, she doesn't have Lyme disease because we had her tested. And she said, well, and I'm so grateful for this interaction, because she said, I don't even really know what I'm talking about, but there's another more sensitive test and you need to go see, an LLMD. I said, I need to see a who? And they said a Lyme literate medical doctor or a Lyme literate naturopathic doctor. And I said, okay, where do you find one of those? And so this friend said, again, we're in California. And she said, well, my friend is seeing Steve Harris at Pacific Frontier Medical. And so I said, okay. And I just went again, didn't give up, just said, didn't discard that, thought I need to go pursue this. And so called over to Dr. Harris's office, got an appointment, learned about the Western blot test, and learned about, it's just not a clinical diagnosis, right? It's a clinical plus symptoms, learned everything and had her tested. And sure enough, it came back positive for Lyme disease. And this was when she was a senior in high school.
Wow, my gosh, what a journey. That the Dr. merry-go-round, that's the perfect way to say it, because that is what it is, You're just going, place to place. And I'm sure as a parent, you also felt it in your gut when you're getting an answer and they're, looking at her and they're saying, she's fine, she's great. I mean, what do you mean? She looks fine, which, by the way, is like the most dreaded thing to say to someone who has any type of chronic illness is you look fine, because it's not taking into account what's happening internally that they can't, see with their own two eyes. So I'm just so glad that you were so persistent and you advocated on her behalf, because that is something so important to, to advocate for the people you love, and then also to really teach people to just never give up and really have that in them to keep advocating. So I'm just so glad that you kept with it. And also
Right.
what an incredible moment with, someone coming up to you. Like, it's so happenstance.
Interestingly, Christina, later, 4 or 5 months later, someone, I think it was at one of the Lyme doctors, said, Lyme disease is called the grocery store diagnosis or grocery store disease. And I said, a grocery store disease? And she said, do you know how many, and this makes sense, how many parents, primarily moms, you're there shopping and then you're talking, you run into someone in the aisle and you start talking about what is going on with your child. And so many people at that time, this is 14 years ago, say just what my friend said. Hey, I don't know much about this, but there's this, thing out there called Lyme disease. So I thought that was, again, the community sharing and together we
Yeah.
collectively get a diagnosis. So
Yes.
that's really great.
That's amazing. That's hysterical. I've never heard that, but that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh man. Oh gosh. All right. So now you know that she has Lyme disease, and you're working with this naturopathic doctor. What is kind of the next few years trajectory? What did your family go through when you sort of found out suddenly, okay, it's Lyme disease? Was it relief that you felt? Was it
Yeah.
like what kind of went through your minds when you found
Well,
out?
of course it's relief. When you finally get a diagnosis, I mean, of course it's immense relief. But then you go, okay, we have a disease that no one knows anything about in our family, and the community, my friends, don't know anything about. So I often say I went to medical school because, again, we're going back 14 years ago. There wasn't as much, now I feel you can, for example, this podcast, right? You can get diagnosed and find a podcast. You can find support groups online. It's amazing and such a blessing that there's so much more support. Instagram, right? You could find things now, not back then. So I just literally bought every book I could find on Lyme disease and read them, cover to cover, scoured the internet, went to other Lyme literate medical doctors' sites just to glean everything. And like I said, it became very intensive for me. So, and I think the more parents can read, the more you are interactive with the doctor and more understanding and helping the decision-making process of which way to go with your treatment, because there's a lot of treatment possibilities out there, and to become part of the process. So, and the other thing that I think when you, besides learning about it is, and you touched on this, Christina, becoming an advocate. I mean, there you are, if you have the Lyme diagnosis and you're the patient, again, we know there's very many different symptoms you can have, but in general, this person's pretty sick at this point and probably isn't able to think clearly for themselves or needs someone to help them think. So, what I not only learning about it, but then I learned I had to be an advocate. If I, like, for example, if someone said to me, why don't you try lymphatic massage? It's like, okay, what is lymphatic massage? Do I know if there's someone lymphatic massage in my area? What type of lymphatic massage? I mean, this all takes time. Yeah. And so what a wonderful thing for a caretaker really to do is to help that person get through the day and decide what is right for them. I also think something that we all deal with is the medication schedule, right? Once you get it, then it's okay, you take this with food, you take this away from food, you take these you can't take another medication or food with this one. I mean, so I used to make a schedule for Sarah. I had it, and every day I would update it with what we were doing that particular day, hour by hour. And so we'd both look at it, and I literally would check it off. Like, this is this medication, we're gonna do this and that. Let's try to schedule a walk. We have this appointment. And again, just helping that person navigate. I made pill bags for her. And I think for me, and this sounds like it's a season. It's not forever. I really had to put my life on hold. I just found that the best thing for my family, for support to Sarah, is not to think, oh, I have to go to that luncheon. So I just pulled away. I just thought I actually was an avid tennis player at that time. I just said, I'm just not going to do that right now. So yeah, it was, and again, I want to say it's a selfless job to be the caretaker, but it's for a season. It's for a season.
Well, Phyllis, thank God Sarah had you as her mother, because we know this is a horrible disease. We're talking over a decade ago in California, where it was even worse, right? So many of our listeners are still struggling to get better from Lyme disease at various stages of the healing journey, whether it's early on or, close to remission or trying to maintain remission in that maintenance mode. Can you share briefly what you did with your daughter to help her regain her health from Lyme disease?
Yes. What we did was, gosh, I'm taking a moment here because it's like, what didn't we do, right? I know that sounds funny, but I think something that is that anyone diagnosed with Lyme disease needs to know is it can't be all killing. It has to be a balance. And so that's my pause, is we would do heavy killing, and then she would just have to take a break, or we would have to integrate. And we're continuing to learn, right? I think all of us, as more and more things are coming out. But Sarah, as I said, was under the care of an MD, Dr. Stephen Harris. And, initially, really whatever he said, we did. And hers was a oral antibiotic initially, and then went to IV antibiotics. And, we kind of did, as I said, a little bit of everything. And I mentioned lymphatic massage. We realized, and again, most people with Lyme disease are slow detoxers. So we found with her, as I said, we just couldn't keep up the strict killing. We had to have this integrative approach as well.
Yeah, yes, 100%. I actually had that exact same story. I tried with the antibiotics and just, constant, doing that, and it killed my stomach and I felt miserable. And, I don't even know the first time I realized I was actually herxing, because when you're told you're going to have a Herxheimer, you're like, what's that? And
Right.
so when you actually, experience it for the first time, and you're like, oh no, I think this is a herx. And then you start to, do something with it, with the massages or any other detox method, and then you get relief. You're like, oh wow. Everything, I'm sure, was such a learning curve. As you were kind of walking through it, but my gosh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I would say to any listener is everybody is different, and you just have to listen to your body, and you can't push yourself too hard, or you're just going to end up in just a pile, literally. There just would be times when, Sarah would be in a pile, and I'd be like, okay, this is no good. Right.
Yeah.
So I definitely think you need to listen to your body. And a common we find with our grant recipients at LymeLight Foundation that a lot of them can't handle the antibiotics, for just what you mentioned, particularly for children. So most of our grant recipients definitely have more of an integrative or a holistic approach for that very reason.
Yes. And something about that, which we know, is that that's not usually covered by insurance. And
right.
There's just such a huge gap there with it, because when you start to go down the road with integrative doctors, which is also, what I did and how I got well, slowly, or actually very quickly, you realize, okay, well, this can't be turned into insurance. So this has to come out of pocket. And that's the thing that, I know obviously I want to kind of jump into now, sort of how you got to the place where you had the idea to form LymeLight. But, it's so many people's stories are very much the same, that when they do find that integrative doctor, they're amazing. They are amazing, and they are finally giving them answers, but it's very expensive. It's so expensive to heal from Lyme.
Well, and it's not even just the integrative doctors, the MDs, the allopathic approach. A lot of that is not covered by Lyme disease. Maybe, for example, maybe the antibiotics are, but the doctor visits aren't. And then, like you said, anything outside of that. So, yeah, that's a great question, Christina. So, when we were at Pacific Frontier. You would be waiting in the waiting rooms, or when we got into the, IV lounges, first of all, you'd interact with other families and patients, but you'd also overhear conversations. And it was amazing what people were doing to afford treatment for their children. Heartbreaking, really. You'd overhear stories of, well, we'll max out the credit cards. Do you think we can get a second one? Or let's just sell the house. Let's sell your jewelry. Let's move in, with your mother. Maybe we can cut our grocery bill down. And you were sitting there almost feeling guilty that for your child, you were in a fortunate enough a place that you could afford the treatment. And so this just kind of resonated, in the back of my mind of, my goodness, I mean, first of all, right, how can this be happening?
Yeah.
But second of all, what can I do about it? And there was another friend of ours who their child also had Lyme disease. And we went to dinner with them one night and we were just talking about this, like, what can we do? What can we do? And they were also in the position where they were able to afford treatment for their child. So we talked about, what if we could just enable families to be able to afford treatment? And, really, if you think about it, for any parent to have to decide between, feeding and housing their child and affording treatment, providing treatment for their child, is really a choice no parent should have to make.
Yeah.
And so we decided, well, okay, let's form LymeLight Foundation. And our mission, which I just kind of said, is to provide treatment grants to children and young adults through age 25 who can't afford the care. And we started small. We started in 2011. And our idea was, we'd have a fundraising event, we'd raise some money, and we'd give it out in grants. And so the first year we had raised $40,000 and had 4 grant recipients. And fast forward now to 2022, this year, we will distribute $1 million in grant funding to 225 thank you, 225 individuals. And then since inception, we have awarded $8 million, and we have 1,148 recipients in 49 states.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Wow, Phyllis, that is wonderful. And I have to tell you, I just want to share here, Rich and I have spoken to thousands of people in the Lyme community. We've interviewed hundreds of people on this podcast, and so many of them have been touched by your organization. I just want you to know, Phyllis, that you are saving lives. I mean, the one person that we absolutely adore, obviously, besides Christina, is Ashley Marba, who is one of our favorite people, and her children's lives were saved because of your not-for-profit and because of LymeLight, Phyllis. So you are truly saving lives, and we just want to thank you so much for all the work you're doing. And if I could just ask you to share quickly what it must be like from your standpoint to see these stories of people being so sick and getting better thanks to the funding you provide. I mean, you have amazing success rates. I think your exit surveys are showing that you have a 70% rate where people are saying they're significantly better because of your foundation, right? So can you give us a little detail into that and what that must be like from your standpoint?
Oh, I got to tell you, like, even right now, I'm sort of tearing up. It's really a gift and a blessing to be in the position that we are. And I know I have this wonderful team and board, and it really is what motivates us. I mean, it's funny. I look back and I think, okay, what would I be doing if I didn't have Lyme and we didn't start this foundation, right? Did I expect this is what I was going to be doing? And the answer is no. But it has been truly, I've looked at now that Lyme has been a gift to our family. And it has been just such a pleasure to meet these families and to learn from these families, and to just know that you're making a huge difference in their lives. And yeah, it's fabulous. I just want to say that. And you're right. We have met, like Ashley, all of our grant recipients. I mean, when I say all, obviously I don't know all, but I've got to meet so many of them through our grant recipient receptions, which we used to have here at our house, to our virtual receptions that we've had now. And that is one thing I want to say about LymeLight Foundation. We didn't just want to give them money and, have them go off in the, wild blue yonder type thing. We really did want to start a relationship, and that we felt that was so key, because again, going back to my experience, it was so isolating. And we thought, if we can get these families together and children together to realize they're not alone, there's other people like them. So we, as best as we can, have tried to build a community. We have a private Facebook group that our recipients can join, which is very active. And I mentioned the grant recipients. I could go grant recipient receptions, which I could go more into. But basically, we really felt that we we wanted to build community. And I have to just say one more thing. The grant funding that we provide is so important, obviously, right? The money is so important, but equally important is that they feel seen, that they feel validated, that they feel not crazy, right? That there is an organization that is giving them money because they believe what they're going through. And we just find, again, that is so important to affirm these families.
Phyllis, can you talk a little bit about your grant reception? Because I think you just had your 10th annual grant reception virtually. And we see them on social media. I saw it on your website. And, you know, you hear about these virtual events, and sometimes you think, oh, they're kind of stuffy, they're weird because they're virtual. But your events look like some of the most fun virtual events we've ever seen. I mean, everybody's dressed up, there's balloons, everybody's happy and smiling. I mean, it's just awesome. So, like, what inspired you to make these virtual events when COVID hit, and even prior to that, when you had them in person, be such fun events? And what kind of activities do you plan for these things to make it worthwhile, or I shouldn't say worthwhile, to make it fun and disarming, and, you know, kind of share this environment of collaborating and sharing stories and getting along with one another at your events? Because it's just such a cool experience to see from the outside looking in at how successful your events are when you run them, Phyllis.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you. But you hit the nail on the head. We want them to be fun, right? Here are sick people. Let's have something fun for them to go to. So that's something that we really try to do. And we also, I'll go back and forth between the live and the virtual, but the live events, we would make it a safe environment. Like, think of going, you know, to a party. A lot of times these families, if they do go to to a party, they're different, right? They have to eat special food. They're gluten-free, they're dairy-free. Here, everyone gets where they are, right? If there's a child lying down over there, we understand what's going on. So that we wanted to make it a safe and fun environment. So the live events, what inspired us to do the virtual events and keep them going through COVID was, what we found is that the parents for these events became kind of a therapy session, right? Here they are, this is live. And again, we would have 25 grant recipients and their families. And the kids were off, playing games and doing art projects, and the parents were there comparing notes. And I always, for the live events, would have the grant recipients introduce themselves and say a little bit about something, and that enabled them to know, oh, that person's about my age. And it was really wonderful. So take that over to the virtual. What you just said, we were like, okay, we can't make this a boring, stuffing Zoom meeting. So we've come up with how we could just make it fun. And this year, our theme was summer fun, and we had leis and we had funny glasses, and we call it our photo booth. So we take various pictures. Those are the pictures that you see. And we have an art project that we do all together, which is we try to make it about hope and about what they're going through. This year, they made trees of hope, which talked about their dreams and their aspirations and where they are. So again, it's all about removing them from a sick place to, hey, you're having fun. And for the virtual, we were able to have over 100 recipients, 100 plus, and their families. Let's see, we had 31 states represented. So 31 out of our 49 states were represented. And again, it's about community. What we do at the end is we have everyone come off mute, and it's just an hour of sharing and caring, right? And that's again what we say, this is sharing. And so it is so interesting because we do a survey, what part of this did you like? What part didn't you like? They always like that part best. And we keep on making it longer and longer and longer. And it's just families doing, and in the chat feature too, hey, I'm from, California too. What part of California are you from? And, it's just so great and fun, like you've said.
That's awesome. Yes, I mean, that really does. I mean, I can imagine when you are otherwise like 24/7 in treatment mode or care mode, right? Whether you're the parent and you're in caregiver mode, or you're the patient and you're in treatment mode, it must be so nice to get together with other people who understand. And it goes both ways, because also for the grant recipients, they're finally in a room with peers who understand them, and they don't have to, pretend to put on a brave face like they feel good. If they lay down, they lay down, and this person gets it. And I'm sure that there have been a lot of bonds formed between the grant recipients as well in finding a friend and community and just someone that they can lean on as well. So I feel like that's just so wonderful because it really goes both ways. You know, it's wonderful for the parents to feel like they have other people to talk to, and then it's wonderful for the recipients as well. So I think that's just
And I
amazing.
have to say, it's wonderful for the LymeLight family. It's one of our favorite days of the year. Check mailing day is another wonderful day, but it's really back to, I think, Matt, what you were asking about. It's our chance to see their faces and hear their stories. I mean, I'm always in tears by the end because I'm just so moved, and by their stories, how brave these people are and what they've gone through. And it's, as I said, it's really wonderful for us.
That is so awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know that we could go on and on forever about like this particular thing because I just, specifically, not feeling alone is so important. And I know that that's something that, is so common otherwise, that it's so isolating in the Lyme community. And so in 2011, when you started this, what we kind of talked about, Lyme was still pretty new in the sense that, some people knew about it, but there still wasn't a lot of information. So how did you go from your first event in 2011 to where you are today? What type of events did you do to raise money for LymeLight? And just, yeah, kind of how did that whole escalade from 2011 to now?
Gosh, that's a great question. So we started initially, and if you go way back on our events tab on our website, we started initially with theatrical plays. We just had the other family that I mentioned, their daughter was in theater. And so she got this idea. She went to school, I believe it was in Ithaca, New York, actually. And she got the idea to bring her classmates who knew she had Lyme and do these little theatrical, not little, I mean, they were lovely. I think we did You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. And it was wonderful to do this. And these were our first events. And some of our donors, this is so interesting, to this day, we met them at these events. So initially, like for any nonprofit, you're just getting your what you're doing out there, right? And explaining what's going on. And it's interesting, and I continue to do this on a daily basis. I continue to talk about Lyme and how prevalent Lyme is. And I think anyone who would come to one of these events, any of our events, besides hopefully having a good time at the event, learns a lot about Lyme and LymeLight. So then we got this idea, which is our annual fundraiser to this day, is called Dart for Art. And I can explain it. Everyone listening is going to be confused, but I will do my best to do it. I had to hear it about 4 times when I first learned about it. We get artists to donate art to our event, Dart for Art. So these are artists which are sharing their talent. I always say they're using their talent for healing for our grant recipients. And what we do with these, typically about 200 pieces of art. And what we do is we go, again, I'm going to say it's a live event. We go to the site and we put up an art gallery, right? So here are these 200 pieces of art and we put up an art gallery. And we've started in smaller venues. We've now grown to where we actually have it at the San Mateo County Event Center. So a fairground, a huge building in San Mateo. And so we put up this art gallery, and guests, when they come to the event, they know they're going to leave with a piece of art. They don't know which one. So, and the Dart part of the event, Dart for Art, is you literally are running for your piece of art. And it's, I love to say this is the closest thing adults do to go to a 4-year-old birthday party, because suddenly everyone comes to this party knowing they're going to get a piece of art, don't know when they're going to dart, which piece do they want, and everyone's energy level is, just high. So how the big donor, or the people that have the sponsors and the patrons at the higher levels, they get their opportunity to dart. And dart, watch the video on our website. We put down a starting line. Women are throwing off their shoes. People are yelling. And you are literally running for your art. And how you claim your art is you take off your name tag and you put it next to your piece of art. So the beginning is a lovely cocktail hour where the artists get to meet with the guests, and the artists stand by their pieces, and it's just this wonderful interaction. Then we have dinner, you hear from the foundation, you always hear from a grant recipient, and then the dart starts. And so it's over in about 4 hours. It's, then you collect your piece of art, and generally people are staying there with a piece of art, and the evening usually ends about that time. But it's just this, again, we're all about what you said, Christina. It's Lyme is can be such a heavy subject. Even our name, LymeLight, we always want to make this, yes, we're dealing with a heavy subject, but let's lighten it up, and let's have fun with it. So it's become kind of a coveted event in our area. And this past year, again, it was online this year, but I think we cleared 235,000, so net of expenses, which means 23 treatment grants. So, and again, it's a beautiful way for artists. Some of our recipients and some of our Lyme families come, and all of our guests to be in one place, learn about Lyme, LymeLight, and have a good time.
Phyllis, I want to tell everybody watching to go to your website, LymeLightFoundation.org, and watch the video on Dart for Art, because I watched it numerous times, and I just watched it again while you're speaking on mute, and you can't help but smile. I mean, I had no audio, and I was watching it with just video, no audio, watching it while you were talking, listening to you, and I'm just glowing and so happy watching it, right? So it's a really fun video to watch, and if you're in a bad mood, go watch it. It's going to make you feel better. I mean, it's such a cool event that you run. So, talking about the money that you raise, right? Can you give us a little bit of detail about how the grants work? If somebody applies and wins what's the process to apply for a grant through LymeLight Foundation? And for people that do win, what is the amount, and how do you distribute the money? And are there rules and regulations towards what the money has to be used for treatment?
Right. Well, you mentioned our website. You can learn all about our grants process on the grants tab at our website. But basically, we say it's for people who can't afford the care. So what we really say is you have to be struggling, to afford it. And we could give you more. Kate Nagel is our treatment grants coordinator, and she is wonderful. And she could talk to, email her or at grants@LymeLightFoundation.org. She could talk more about the parameters with you. But in general, you put an application in, and it's like, any application, like a college application, and we have a customized software that it really is kind of like a college application, meaning it's all done online, and it's a very, I want to say, easy process. I mean, it's a very streamlined process for families to go through. And then the reviewers, so our board reviews the grant recipients the grant applications 3 times a year. So we award grants 3 times a year. We do give supplemental grants to our already established, we call them interim grants, already established grant recipients, an additional 3 times. So we distribute funds a total of 6 times a year. But so for the grants process of when you get awarded, the amount that you get awarded is $10,000. But like I've already said, we don't just write a check for $10,000. That's not what we do. We distribute the funds generally in 3 increments. And generally it's 3,000, 4,000, 3,000 generally. And so again, talking about building community, we want to have, when the first 3,000 is distributed, we want to hear from you. We want to hear, matter of fact, we have to hear from you before we distribute more grant funds. We need to see receipts. Are you using your funds appropriately? And we want feedback. Have the funds, we realize it's the first funding, but are they making a difference, or what is your plan? And Matt, that was a good question. LymeLight does not tell you what you have to do. We give our grant families autonomy, and we've already touched on how specialized and how personalized the care must be. So we don't say has to be antibiotics, has to be antimicrobials. People do completely alternative. Maybe they're going to do hyperbaric oxygen. Maybe they're going to purchase an amp coil and do that. Whatever, we have a list of what is covered. For example, even traveling to medical, if you're going out of state, that is covered. So there's a list of what is covered. And and we actually like to hear from the families, what is working from you. And that's been interesting too, right? What is working for people? How are people getting well? I say this when I speak, is that LymeLight is sitting on all this information of what has been helping families. And I think at some point we'll correlate this and get it out there. But yeah, that's how the process works. And it actually is a very seamless, nice process. And I will say that not all grant families use the full $10,000. It depends. And you can go to one doctor, you could go to multiple doctors, you could change course. And when you give a family $10,000, right, and they know they're going to get that $10,000, they become stewards of that $10,000. They want it to be used for the best way for their child. So that's empowering for the families too. And that's, again, part of what we want to do. What do you want to do? Let's help you to set you and your family up for the most success possible.
Phyllis, I want to ask, and I bet a lot of our listeners are curious, how did you meet Christina, right? Because we interviewed Christina on this podcast, and Christina's known you for quite a while. And we know, Rich and I, what you guys have done together. But if you can just share with us how you met Christina and how your friendship and relationship and partnership has grown and what you've done together for LymeLight.
Well, and Christina, you feel free to jump in as I'm talking. But the lady of Lyme is Christina. So what happened is that Christina, about 5 years ago, approached us. And at that time, she had a Christmas store. And she said, I would like all the proceeds from the Christmas store to go to LymeLight Foundation. And of course, we were like thrilled. I mean, number one, thrilled that she recognized us, right? And number two, thrilled that she was going to do this. And I want to say that this, again, on our website, we call these events hosted by others. We welcome anyone to partner with us with any idea that you have for fundraising, to partner with us, which is exactly what Christina said. I know what you do. I would love to help as much as I can. And this is my talent. This is what I like to do. So how fun was that? She did that for a couple of years. She also did a sweater for the Thanksgiving season that said thankful on it. And that, I think, Christina, you sold through Amazon. And again, the funds went to LymeLight Foundation. But the big turning point was in 2020, when she approached us and said, in a nice way, hey, I'd like to help you with your leisure wear on your website. And I said, we'd like to be helped with our leisure wear on our website. So Christina, and it was really so fun for our entire team, she did a whole presentation on what we could have for really upscale leisure wear. And we decided together what should be there. And I really would love everyone to go to the store and see Christina's wonderful, at LymeLightFoundation.org, and see Christina's wonderful creations. And they continue to be popular, and Christina manages that for us. So we said, this is great, but she handles the ordering. She handles, well, she could go more into that. But anyway, so it's just been a beautiful partnership. And really, we knew that this wasn't going to, make a ton of money for our foundation, because it's kind of just something we do. But it's also, again, a way for Christina to give back, and for our kind of unify our grant recipient, anyone who wants to wear a LymeLight piece of clothing. And then for the last 2 years, Christina has made t-shirts, which we've used as a kickoff for our LymeLight's May Lyme Awareness campaign. So again, it's just been a visual and wonderful way to kick off the campaign. So I say this all the time. I say Christina has been truly a blessing and a gift to LymeLight Foundation.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. It's just been the most fun. And I know you talked a little bit, of course, about, Kate and some of the people on the back end, but everyone at LymeLight is amazing. I mean, everyone I have worked with, they are so kind, they're encouraging, they are wonderful. I mean, it's just made this just the best thing ever, because whenever we were, I know I had presented the pieces to you and we met on Zooms and we were kind of deciding like, okay, do we go with this or that? And everyone was so excited about everything. I mean, it's the best. It's the best. And so now, yes, we've been working to do these shirts yearly. And we did a tie-dye shirt that was like the first limited edition t-shirt, which was just so fun. Tie-dye was so fun. And I always love seeing all the grant recipients, like the families together. And it really is just kind of like a fun way to unify. It's a great way to support LymeLight. So yes, I would definitely encourage anyone to go and check it out. I know I'm a little biased, but.
And Christina, it's interesting too, because, we ask our LymeLight at the grant recipient reception, the virtual, wear a piece of green or a LymeLight t-shirt. And a lot of them are wearing, your LymeLight t-shirts. I'm wearing your tie-dye LymeLight t-shirt.
Yes.
So yeah. And
them.
we should say that last year, the tie-dye t-shirt, a grant recipient wearing the tie-dye t-shirt and the inside as well on our holiday card. So that was a neat being able to feature, again, we're all a community, all working together. And we just got those tie-dye t-shirts. We should probably almost bring them back for a second. They were so popular and they're so beautiful. Yeah.
Yes, they were. They're so comfy too. I wear all like every single one of the pieces. I love the joggers. So yeah, that's just so fun. And I just love that. And I love seeing the photos from that and everyone coming together. And it just is so much of a community, which that's such a highlight to me for LymeLight. It's not just like, it's like you said, it's not just giving the money to them and then just saying, okay, goodbye. It's a constant community, but also on the back end, there are so many pieces to what makes LymeLight, work. And I know that, outside of course, you doing the work for, the grant recipients, you all do a lot of work for advocating for a lot of different causes. And I know that you speak on different conferences and you go and you do different talks. So can you share a little bit about that yourself or your team, some of the places you've gone, things you've talked about, ways that you have advocated as well in the community?
Well, as I said, any of our events, of course, we always speak at our events. One thing we used to do was, and this was in May, Lyme awareness, and again, we haven't done it recently, is we used to go to the farmers market. And again, that's a way to raise awareness. So we're always talking about wherever you are, talk about Lyme, talk about LymeLight. That's part of what we do. But where I've spoken, really the place that I have spoken outside of LymeLight has been at the Lyme conference, which has been put on by Stephen and Alexandra Cohen Foundation, who are one of our funders. And that's been a great conference where anyone who they have given money to, we all come together in sort of a think tank type of format. Each year has been different. And of course, like everything, the COVID has and the pandemic has changed it. It's changed to a virtual format as well. But anyway, I could tell what I talked about every year, but for the last few years, the focus has mainly been on congenital Lyme. And that was in 2019, I was asked to moderate a panel on congenital Lyme at the LymeLight conference. And we weren't even sure whether this would be something people were interested in or what the response would be. And Sue Faber was on, who is Lyme Hope. She was a Lyme advocate, and she's a registered nurse. And as long with two of that initial panel with two Lyme literate doctors. And I think that was the beginning, an eye-opening for all of us of how interested people were in this subject and how much they wanted to learn more. And I am thrilled to see how much progress, it's the beginning, but how it's kind of become a hotter topic in the Lyme community and talked about. At the 2019 conference, going back to Kate, our treatment grants coordinator, I said, hey, real quick, let's just do a quick study. What do we think? How many of our grant recipients have been, infected, mother to baby transmission, infected in utero? And because we knew we had grant recipients talking about generations, like 3 and 4 generations of Lyme. We know we had grant recipients where there was, 4 to 5 kids sick with Lyme. We knew we had whole families sick with Lyme. And it's like, okay, well, it's unlikely these are all entirely a tick bite, right? Something more is going on. So at that time, Kate's quick number to me was, we think it's about 50%. And that's what I presented. Those videos are also on our website, on our Lyme and pregnancy page. So that was kind of the aha moment for all of us. What is going on? So we then, after that conference in 2020, we decided we should really look at our grant recipients. And I was joking with Matt that this could be a whole nother podcast to go into all of this. And I'm not going to go into all of our parameters, but we set parameters up and we said, okay, which of these families, legitimately have, we can stand behind, we believe have congenital Lyme. And we found it's 50% and maybe as high as 60%. At 60% would be including all the likelies, and I can go into what that means. But that is like, you're telling me that 578 to 650 of our grant recipients were infected this way. So that was that was sort of an aha moment. I did another panel for shared virtual in 2020. And then recently, Kate was able to go to the Banbury conference, which was a think tank directly focused on congenital Lyme. Now this brought, how exciting was this? This brought scientists, this brought doctors, this brought Lyme advocates, the CDC, all together to talk about congenital Lyme. And at the end of the think tank conference, it was recommended to the NIH that we need additional funding, additional research. Well, funding too, but additional research. And that's the thing. There's not research done on this. Like, right? A child isn't born with a bullseye rash. I mean, how do you know your child has Lyme? And LymeLight has put on our website under resources a Lyme and pregnancy page, because we realize how much we don't know, and how necessary research and fundraising is for this subject. And Kate also just participated in the most recent, it was a couple of weeks ago, Lyme Mind conference, where Sue Faber was the moderator for this wonderful panel, which again brought the CDC, brought Lyme organizations, and just talked about congenital Lyme and how much more research we need in this area.
Yes.
And Phyllis, once again, Ashley Marba was actually on this year's Lyme Mind just a few weeks ago, right? So another connection to LymeLight. And it's just so cool to see yourself and a lot of people that have been benefiting from your grants and just your research and your work that you're providing to be presented year after year after year at this Lyme Mind event in New York City. But what I find even more powerful is you first presented this in 2019. And I believe it was the next year, the CDC finally put on their website that congenital Lyme is real. I think they said it was rare, which I'm not sure, I like, right? But they at least admitted that it's real and put it on their website, right? So can you talk about that? I mean, that must have been a great feeling after you had this huge conference and you did this presentation. The next year, the CDC is listening and they update their website. That's so cool, right? I mean, that's really powerful.
It is so, absolutely so cool. And I believe, I wish Sue were here to confirm this, I believe both the NIH and the CDC representatives were at our panel discussion, because they did, Sue was kind of flooded with, because she's really, I just have to do a shout out to Sue Faber. I mean, what she has done for congenital Lyme is nothing short of amazing and kind of a miracle. I mean, she has been affected. She has congenital Lyme, her children are sick. So she has just been pushing. And she, that, like you just said, it's kind of like the floodgate opened. And you're right, January of 2020, that hit, the CDC website, and we were all like, oh, I mean, fantastic. And I have to say that it has been amazing to see the CDC open really to do this and really to work with us. When I say work with us, I to be open to this whole idea. And yeah, that's why we actually did the deep dive, is because once it hit the website, we were like, this is amazing.
So Phyllis, can you talk to us about being a caregiver, right? Because I know this is something, Christina, you're passionate about, discussing the role of a caregiver. And I can say in my own personal experience, I would not have been able to get through chronic Lyme without the help of my mother, my grandmother, my father, and my grandfather. Simply would not have been able to, right? I couldn't speak, I couldn't communicate, I couldn't drive. I was so neurologically and cognitively impaired. So, I know there's some great resources out there like Patient Talk, Christina, I think that you want to speak about. And I'm curious, Phyllis, what your thoughts are, having been a caretaker to your daughter as well. If you guys could speak about that a little bit, please.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% on the same page. I always say that without my parents, I would not be here today, because just like you talked about earlier, when you're so sick, you can't advocate for yourself. You can't sit and think about what medication, you need to take, and is this a good route to take? You're just so mentally spent. And I feel like in this space, there's obviously a lot of conversation about people who have Lyme disease and patients and stuff, but I feel like caregivers, they really are heroes, and they don't get that recognition, or maybe they don't have that support. And I know that when I was, going through it, I looked at my parents, it was basically like the two of them against the world, in the sense that they didn't have any other friends who understood, why were they suddenly not going anywhere and staying home all the time, and what's happening, like they just didn't understand. And so they had no one really to connect with on that. And I feel like that is, something where having the support on both ends is so important. And I think that being a caregiver is such a unique thing. I think it's such a, I often say that it's sort of like, it's unique, but it's a blessing, because you're so close with your caregivers and your parents, and, you have such a special bond with that. But yeah, I think that's something that's just not talked about that often.
Yeah, when I touched on earlier, kind of what, giving up, if you will, like how the sacrifices a caregiver makes. So yeah, so I couldn't agree more. I mean, our Lyme families often say, well, think of it. One parent, maybe both parents were working, then one has to stay home with the children, right?
Yep.
So then you become a one income family. Sometimes both of them, they can't work for a while because either both are sick or both need it. Most families, I don't know, Christina, whether your family did this, but divide and conquer, right? One's taking care of the kids, and then one's dealing with the insurance, trying to get coverage or helping make the appointments. I mean, it's just so much for, I love the fact that you said your parents, because Lyme affects the whole family. Other children are affected. I mean, mom is so crazily busy on trying to get this one child, if it's just one child sick, or if it's a whole family, how does mom handle all that? So being a caregiver, I think, is a really, really tough job. And yet, I mean, if that's one thing we look for at LymeLight, is there the support system, right? Is there someone that can help this patient? And I'm sure, Christina, you remember being sick with Lyme when you can't even process. There's a form you have to fill out. You can't even fill out the form. No. Because, I mean, you try to explain that to someone who hasn't had Lyme. Now with COVID, a lot of people have experienced that brain fog, but it's like, what does brain fog mean? Right.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the thing that you realize, is that when you are sick with Lyme, you are focused on getting better, and you need someone else to help you do everything else. One thing that might help caregivers or anyone listening is on our website, or you could just go directly to Patient Talk. And that is a series of videos that is one of the diseases they cover is Lyme disease. There's a few that they cover, and they purposely interviewed doctors, caregivers, and patients. And there is a section on caregivers, and I think that's worth listening to, because again, Christina, it's the isolation. When you're doing this as a caregiver and you're doing it when I say on your own, it's just very lonely.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
the nice thing
lonely.
now is there's so many more support groups. So many more support groups. And
Yep.
I would recommend anyone, we have a support group list on our website. Again, we've all become so technologically sophisticated right now. You could join a support group in Minneapolis. I mean, wherever you are, you're not limited to your state anymore. So I would highly recommend that as well.
Yes, and thank goodness for that, honestly, because so I started getting sick when I was 18, and that's when I first started having symptoms. And then by the time I was 23, I was totally bedridden. And for me, when I go back, in my head, I know exactly when that tick bite happened, right? So I was still, like a young adolescent, started to have symptoms around then. But one of my best friends, she was someone who had congenital Lyme, so her symptoms were very different. And so that's one thing I definitely want to kind of circle back to really quickly before we wrap up is, for those children who have congenital Lyme, I think you talked a little bit about how it's not your standard process. It's not you get bit by a tick, you see the bullseye rash, you do so it presents very differently. So can you share just a little bit for people listening about how it might present in a child who might have gotten it congenitally? And so, if any parents are listening or anyone's listening, this might kind of, make them think potentially that they might need to test their kids. So any insight on that, we would love.
Yes, I would love to touch on that. And, I just realized in my last talking about congenital Lyme, I want to do the person at the CDC who has been so wonderful. Her name is Sue Visser. And I realized I didn't mention her by name. It's the two Sues, Sue Faber, Sue Visser. So I just want to, Sue, if you're listening, I just want to do a shout out to you. And also to Holiday Goudreau, who is at LymeLight Foundation, because she has also been posting about this, and other Lyme foundations have as well. But I just want to say, I love this collaboration amongst Lyme organizations. I mean, this is how we're stronger together, right? So I just wanted to do a shout. I realized I didn't do that at the end. But yeah, this is again a whole subject, because you realize, sometimes it's, well, for example, for my Lyme diagnosis, it came from my child's, she was diagnosed. So that's how I got my Lyme diagnosis. And that's often the way it is when there can be a child who's sick that then, or 2, 3 children sick, you don't know what's going on. Then the parents end up getting tested. But how do kids with congenital Lyme? That's the hard thing. And this is again why we need more research. Is the hard thing is, so you as the mom have Lyme, mom or dad, right? Because it takes two, have Lyme, and you want to know if if you've passed it on to your child. Let's just simplistically say that. It may not happen right away. Your child may be absolutely fine, and your child may even test negative and for Lyme, and it may come out later. For example, as a toddler, you might have, a lot of our congenital Lyme kids have a lot of colds and a lot of ear infections and strep throat, and are just sicker than the normal child, right? But that's still within the realm, right? You're just kind of sitting there going, okay, well, I just have a child that gets more colds.
Yeah.
Then if they become, school, or you might notice behavioral problems that, oh gosh, my child isn't assimilating in the group at preschool as well as they could be. And why is this person not able to sit on her mat and the other children are? It could be neurological, headaches. One of our grant recipients said to her mom, she was suffering, we now know, from migraine headaches, but she called them beeps. I have beeps in my head, mommy.
Oh.
And, and so what are beeps in your head? But that was, think of it, if you're not verbal and that's all you've known, how do you know if the beeps aren't normal? Right. A child, who's always had beeps in their head, headaches, may just think that's what it's like. It's not like you've had a period of wellness and then you've gotten sick. If these children are born sick, that's what they know.
Yep.
And then a lot of times it can be school age. There can be, an ADD, diagnosis, or, there could be the teacher calling you in and saying, we don't know why, but your child, is being disruptive in class. So it's all these, again, more research and study is needed, but it's all these symptoms that, these children born to Lyme moms need to be followed, but pediatricians don't even know about it, right? So
Yep.
that's the crazy thing. I dream of a day when we have the checklist at the pediatrician's office and these things are happening, when they say, oh, you should test your child for Lyme, because they're seemingly unrelated, right? A headache, won't sit on the mat at preschool, to disruptive, or is having a hard time reading because their eye isn't tracking properly, right?
Yep.
So it's very, it can be very different. And that's why we just feel so strongly, and again, we put up this Lyme and pregnancy page, that anyone who has Lyme or is having some of the symptoms we're talking about and is wanting to get pregnant, really to talk to their Lyme medical doctor about it and decide, if they should treat during pregnancy, which we think that you should. I mean, that is LymeLight. I mean, of course, we're seeing these 500 plus children, and we're thinking, okay, if mom could start treating beforehand, you'd have a better shot at not having a Lyme child. Not guaranteed, but a better shot. And that doesn't have to mean antibiotics. It could be, like I said, it could be an integrative approach. It could be antimicrobials, whatever is right for you. But the goal would be to have less children, born with Lyme.
Yes. And this really does just beautifully circle back to what we talked about in the beginning, which is advocacy, and so if you know something is wrong, don't give up. If you know that your child is acting off, and you're, even if they're unrelated, like you said, okay, so well, they're acting up at school, and maybe this is this and this is that. If you know something is not right, keep going, because there is going to be a doctor that's going to listen to you and is going to look at your child or you and just say, okay, I understand what you're saying. There's all these things happening here. This is not normal. Let's figure it out. And so much of that is really just trusting that gut feeling that you have, and, not giving up and continuing to follow it down the line.
Right. And another thing for anyone listening who wants to know more about congenital Lyme from our grant recipients is we, and you mentioned Ashley Marva, because what they did at both at Banbury, the conference, and at Lyme Mine, they showed videos that we created, LymeLight created. And so what we did is we interviewed the families that we knew that had, not all of them, obviously, a handful that had congenital Lyme, and had them speak about their experience. And then we have combined, there's some individual families that are highlighted, and then there's a combination. And for Banbury, each day they showed one, again, for the Banbury conference, what LymeLight brought was the patient voice to the conference, and hey, this is real. Look at these people are saying this. And then they showed one this year at the beginning, at the beginning of the Lyme Mine conference for the congenital Lyme panel discussion, perinatal Lyme discussion. So that's another way. I think video is such a great way to see what families are going through and see if this feels like an experience you're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just really never stop kind of advocating for yourself. And so, I think that that's beautiful with that patient, the videos that you show, because I feel like there's probably so many people who might see that and be like, you know what, that sounds like a family I know down the street, or that sounds like someone that, maybe I might meet at the grocery store or at church or something like that. And oftentimes that's that ripple effect. And it really is just very much about continuing to advocate, not losing hope. And I feel like that's just all such an important, critical thing, and something that LymeLight brings, and something that you, of course, individually are passionate about, and is just so important, so important.
My husband used to say to me, he still does say to me, you are not to mention the L word tonight. So, we'd go to a party and he would see me in the corner and he would say, oh no, she's talking with someone about Lyme. It's hard not to talk to someone about Lyme, right? It's all around us. And I do often tell myself, if I want a night off, I'm not going to go there tonight, but invariably I go there. I can't help myself. My friends are very patient with me.
But that's amazing though. I mean, honestly, like you said, it happens naturally, right? You're talking to someone, you're not trying to do it, but something comes up and it's like, oh, I just have to say this one thing, you know? So
Mhm.
I totally understand that. I totally understand.
Well, back to what you were talking about, the whole grocery store, experience. If that person had said, I'm not going to say anything and then walked
Yeah.
on, who knows where we would be, right?
Yep.
So I
Yep.
kind of feel like, yeah, you need to say the words, put it out there,
Yeah.
but then it's up to them to see whether they're going to pick it up and move with it or not.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. Oh man, thank you so much for your time today, Phyllis. I'm just so grateful that you could come and you could share about LymeLight and the wonderful work you do, and just the trajectory of how this, this little seed was planted and what it's turned into today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to come on,
Yes.
really. And anyone, as I said, anyone who would like to learn more about us, go to our website. And we would love to hear from any family or any parent who wants more information. We really would. And yeah, and thank you. And thank you for what you're doing, that you're bringing people like me on and helping to spread awareness, and people are learning, and it's just really wonderful.
And we just want to reinforce for everybody to go to your website again. That's LymeLightFoundation.org. And for everybody who wants to learn more about the awesome Christina Kovacs, they should check out her podcast episode 138, Lady of Lyme. And that's on our website, tickbootcamp.com. And also, Christina has this awesome blog, ladyoflyme.com, and can be found on Instagram at Christina_Koves, Koves. And I just want to say, on behalf of Rich and I and the entire Tick Bootcamp community, Phyllis, Christina, you both were amazing. You gave us such hope and energy, and I have hope for the future of Lyme disease because of the two of you. So thank you so much for joining our podcast. You've made our day, you made our week, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ah, of course. This was so fun. I'm so happy to be here every time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to our Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Phyllis Bedford, founder of LymeLight Foundation. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Phyllis and the LymeLight Foundation, please check out their website, LymeLightFoundation.org. Secondly, if you enjoyed this episode of Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Tick Bootcamp has created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared to us by our podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com/bite to view the blueprint. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates for our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And please take a minute to leave us an honest review on your podcast platform of choice. And finally, if you would like to search our podcast library of over 300 episodes, including myself, please subscribe to our email list or share feedback on our website at tickbootcamp.com. Thank you, as always, for listening.